There's a story that's doing the rounds at the moment concerning a steakhouse chain. I think it's a chain of steakhouses, Hawksmoor. I'm not really familiar with it because I don't think there's any branches up here. I've never been to one. But anyway, Tommy Robinson and his entourage were asked to leave a branch in London, and it's provoked a lot of debate. I'm going to read out the details in a second from well, like I said, it's doing the round. This particular one from a site called the Caterer, which I'm also not familiar with, but it has more or less the main details. Um, so I'm going to read that out. But let me just put my cards on the table before I get into this. I do not like or trust Tommy Robinson. I don't think he's the folk hero that he's made out to be. Um, he has a lengthy criminal record, including for libel. One of the most contemptible things Robinson done was falsely accuse a 15-year-old boy in West Yorkshire of harassing two teenage girls. And this was supposed to be some sort of justification for the fact that that boy was being bullied. He was a Syrian refugee. And the boy's family then got lawyers to sue Robinson for libel. Robinson then admitted it was false, but instead of apologising to his victim, he just doubled down. He claimed he was duped and just continued making false claims. I don't think he's someone who can be trusted. I don't think he's the Robin Hood type figure that people make him out to be. And I know this video runs the risk of attracting his fanboys and fangirls, so be it. In my experience, I don't think very objectively. Robinson's like their cult leader, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, to give him his full name. Honestly, I think the guy's just a glorified football hooligan who's jumped on the bandwagon of certain controversial issues. I don't think he's a responsible figure. I don't have much time for him. It doesn't matter that he's raising issues that are important, like the grooming gangs, Islamist extremism, and so on. He's the wrong messenger. Not because of, I've heard some say it's because he's a working class guy and that's the reason. No, it's because of the way he goes about it. That having been said, I do have mixed feelings on what has transpired. I just want to put it out there because, in this sort of situation, people are going to think, oh, it's because you're for or against Robinson. Well, I don't trust Robinson, but I don't necessarily agree with the restaurant's approach. Now, let's see, I've just lost the screen, just bear with me. I've honestly mixed feelings about the way the restaurant responded. What's happened? I've lost. Excuse me, bear with me a second. The screen just froze. I'll have to get this up again. Um, I think it gets into the wider issue of how these sort of things are dealt with. Anyway, this is the article. It is by Jungmin Seo. Chief Executive Will Beckett stressed the incident was not about politics or beliefs. I honestly question that. Anyway, British Steakhouse Hawksmoor has issued a statement responding to reports that it asked far-right activist Tommy Robinson to leave one of its restaurants. That's the way the reporter's writing, incidentally, not my words. Will Beckett, co-founder and chief executive of Hawksmoor, said our focus is always to give the best restaurant experience to the most people possible. On Thursday, a public figure was asked to leave one of our restaurants because guests and staff felt uncomfortable and had complained. The party left peacefully and politely on request. He stressed the intervention was not about politics or beliefs, and added Hawksmoor is not a political organisation. We're a group of restaurants. We want to welcome as many people as possible, regardless of background or views, to our teams or as our guests. We're not trying to engage in a political debate, in a public debate. The team has had to deal with a huge amount of fallout from this, some of which is quite concerning. We would like them to get back to focusing on looking after those people and our guests. Thank you to them and the many who have been so supportive. The statement comes after Gurmeet Singh Kalarai, who had been dining with Robinson at Hawksmoor in London last week, posted on X, just been kicked out of Hawksmoor Steakhouse for no reason, literally just had our starters. An accompanying video showed a member of staff asking the party to leave because the team felt uncomfortable serving the table. He also handed them Beckett's business card, suggesting to email the chief executive should they have any questions about the incident. The post has since received over 14,000 likes and attracted over 3,000 comments. Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, pleaded not guilty to charges of harassing journalists at Westminster Magistrates Court last week. Hawksmoor has been approached for further comment. This is one of those things where I think you can actually aggravate a problem. Here's my question. If this is about the staff feeling uncomfortable because of who Tommy Robinson is, why serve him at all? This doesn't make sense. They already had their starters. So why not just refuse him at the door? I mean, they must have known who he is. He's a prominent figure, as the CEO said. He's a public figure. They must have known who he is. So why give them drinks and a starter, yet ask them to leave halfway through the meal? That doesn't really make sense. If you're uncomfortable with someone, um, surely it makes more sense to just say, "Look, sorry, you can't enter our establishment to begin with." I also think that the public statement that's made there, I don't think it's entirely honest. Clearly, it is about politics and beliefs. Why else would you ask them to leave? Because there's no indication that they were being disruptive or trying to protest in any way or doing anything other than sitting down to a meal. So to say it's not about politics and beliefs, I think it's disingenuous. I also think, he says that we're not trying to engage in public debate. Well, you've invited public debate by asking him to leave. Like I say, it's actually creating a problem, then complaining that the problem's happened. Now, I wouldn't put past Robinson and his entourage to have perhaps gone to. Well, that might be. I was going to say if they've gone here looking to, create a situation, but I don't know if Hawksmoor is known for being a left wing establishment or what. But if they went to Witherspoon's pub, would it be the same thing? I don't know. I mean, some have alleged that it's known for being a progressive chain. I don't know. I honestly don't know enough about it to say that. If that's the case, it may be that Robinson and they were looking to create a situation. But ultimately, the problem with this is it sends out the message we're, as a public business, going to refuse people we just don't like. I think it is disingenuous to say it's not about politics and beliefs. Robinson's known as a right wing activist. The staff obviously don't like that. But again, it gets into the question why serve him in the first place? I would actually have more respect for their argument if they just came out and said, we refuse entry to Mr. Robinson and his entourage because their views do not align with our values. Something like that. That would actually be honest. But this rather vapid response about we're not trying to engage in public debate, that's not about politics. It's come on, it clearly is. And then I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong. I just think they should be honest about it. Now, then we get into the question, does a business have a right to turn someone away? Well, Robinson has a criminal record, so they could reasonably argue we're preventing him from entering because we don't want someone with a criminal record entering our establishment. Um, but you have to ask, would the staff take the same attitude if, for example, an Islamist hate preacher was to go there? Would it be the same attitude? Or is it just cherry picking? Because if it's cherry picking, the fact that Robinson's right wing, then what? It sends out a message, not just that he can't enter, but that his followers are not welcome. And whether we like it or not, a lot of people support him. I don't support him. I don't trust him, but I recognize a lot of people do support him. Um, I think that if you're in a public business, you need to be very careful with things like this because you could end up causing more problems than solutions. I know a lot of his supporters are going out of their way to say, "How do we boycott this?" But they've never heard of it. Um, then the other side of it is people who will agree with their decision or maybe go to support the business. I honestly have mixed views. Part of me thinks, well, they do have a right to turn someone away if there is an issue there whereby they think that person's politics and their track record, more importantly, I would say, his track record of criminal indictments, that is a legitimate reason perhaps for turning someone away. I would say much more so than political beliefs. But they haven't even cited that. In fact, if Beckett had come out and said Mr. Robinson has a criminal record, so we are not comfortable with him visiting our establishment, as a safeguarding measure, then that would also warrant more respect. I don't think they've handled this well, because I just don't think that's believable to say it's not about politics or beliefs. Um, of course, businesses have a duty of a duty of care to staff. But again, why did the staff serve Robinson if they were so uncomfortable? Some cynics may, I don't believe this, but some may even say it's all a publicity stunt to get their restaurant in the news. I don't know about that. Seems to be a successful business to start off with, so I'm not sure if that's necessary. But my question is, why serve him at all? If they really felt uncomfortable, why get the drinks? Why give them the starters? And then just decide, oh, well, we're uncomfortable, so we're not going to serve anymore. Um, I assume they paid money for what they got. So, um, I don't know. I just think they haven't handled this well. If they really have an ideological opposition to Tommy Robinson, they should be honest about it. They should have said, sorry, you can't enter it from the beginning. Granted, it probably would have still been a story, but at least they would be more honest about the position. My issue with Hawksmoor is not that they've turned away Tommy Robinson, um, but I just don't think they're entirely honest about the reasoning for doing so. I mean, yes, the staff felt uncomfortable, but to say it's not about politics, that's just disingenuous. I don't believe it. Now, if I was a CEO of a restaurant chain, I wouldn't be because I'm not interested in the catering market. But if I was, there's a certain public figures I would think about turning away. Put it this way, if Jeremy Kyle came to one of my establishments, I would seriously think about saying, no, sorry, you're not welcome here. Because I think what he has done as a public figure is contemptible. But there's always a risk with that. If you are in a public business, cherry picking which customers you want based on their political viewpoints, it's risky because you end up polarizing their supporters. Now, again, this isn't to say that Tommy Robinson supporters necessarily would go to this place in the first place, but I honestly think it would carry more weight if they said, yes, we asked Mr. Robinson to leave because his public record and his views clash with our values as a business, something like that. But instead, I think they've given a rather rapid response. I don't think that's a strong response at all. It's not being entirely honest. And yeah, it's getting into the point about safeguarding, but um, because guests and staff felt uncomfortable and complained, um, was not about politics and beliefs. I just don't believe that. And I think Beckett would, if he issued a statement saying, this does not align with our values, I think that would be more honest. Because you have to get into the question, was Robinson and his entourage, were they causing any trouble? Were they refusing to pay? Were they being noisy or something like that? As far as we could tell, they weren't. So then what is the reason for them being asked to leave? I also think it's very evasive to say we're not getting into debate. We are not a political establishment. Yeah, but you've made it political by choosing to cherry pick who you want in your establishment. So it's a bit hypocritical to say that, really. Um, I don't criticize them for asking Robinson to leave. My contention is I just don't think they're honest in the reasoning, entirely honest at least. Let me know your thoughts. If you're a Robinson supporter, like I say, well, that's my position. I've no doubt some of his supporters will come and say I'm a leftist, I'm an idiot, because there is sort of a tunnel vision with Tommy Robinson supporters. Criticize their dear leader, their, you know, um, our Tommy, then, you're a leftist. I'm not actually. Um, and, like I say, would this establishment hold the same attitude if it was an Islamist hate preacher? But on this issue, actually, Keir Starmer was asked to leave a pub a while back. And there are certainly pubs out there, I've seen them on social media, no doubt the very same sort of places that Tommy Robinson supporters would say, oh, they're wonderful, the great patriots, who expect left wing figures to leave. So you can't have it both ways, that's also hypocritical. If you're criticising this establishment for asking Robinson to leave, then don't criticize or don't support a right wing establishment that would want Keir Starmer to leave or someone else associated with the left. I just think if you're a public business, it's you need to be cautious with this sort of thing because it sends out the message that you're not only asking that person to leave, you're polarizing their supporters and saying you're not going to be welcome here if we don't agree with your political point of view. I mean, it would be like, let me make this comparison. The CEO of Weatherspoon, the Weatherspoons chain, is a well-known Brexiteer. Imagine if he turned round and said, "Anyone who voted Remain isn't allowed in my pub." That would be outrageous, and it would be very stupid from a business perspective. Um, yeah, maybe it's a bit of hyperbole because this is one group, but that then expands to Robinson supporters. I don't know. I've just mixed views on it. Let me know your thoughts.